The sound of sobbing carried across the cemetery on a wind that smelled of dust and dying wildflowers, and Yates Drummond reined in his horse to listen, wondering what kind of grief could make a person cry like their heart was being torn clean out of their chest. It was late afternoon in August of 1878, and the sun hung heavy over Denver, Colorado, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Yates had been riding through town on his way to deliver a string of horses to a ranch outside the city limits when the sound caught his attention. He was a man of 26 years, weathered by long days working cattle and breaking wild mustangs, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of creek water under shade. He had learned early in life that other people's sorrows were best left alone, but something about those particular sobs made him pull his gelding to a stop outside the iron gates of the cemetery. He dismounted slowly, tying his horse to the fence post before walking through the gates. The cemetery sprawled across a gentle hillside, dotted with markers ranging from simple wooden crosses to elaborate granite headstones. The crying grew louder as he walked, and soon he spotted her kneeling between two freshly dug graves, her dark dress pooled around her in the dirt, her whole body shaking with the force of her weeping. Yates approached carefully, clearing his throat when he was still several feet away so as not to startle her. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, her face streaked with tears and dirt where she had apparently been clawing at the earth. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and tumbled down around her shoulders. Even in her grief, there was a striking beauty to her features, though her gray eyes were hollow with pain. "Forgive me, miss," Yates said quietly, removing his hat. "I heard you crying and wanted to make sure you were all right." She stared at him for a long moment, then let out a bitter laugh that turned into another sob. "All right. Look around you, stranger. Does it seem like I am all right?" Yates glanced at the two graves. The wooden markers were simple but freshly carved. One read, "Jonathan Thorne, beloved husband, 1850–1878," and the other, "Sarah Thorne, precious daughter, 1876–1878. His chest tightened with understanding. "Your family." "My entire world," she whispered, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "The fever took them both within 3 days of each other. My husband first, then my baby girl. She was only 2 years old. She kept crying for her papa, and I could not save her. I could not save either of them." Yates felt the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy blanket. He had known loss in his life, had buried his own father when he was barely 16, but he could not imagine losing both a spouse and a child in such quick succession. He knelt down in the dirt beside her, not caring that the dust would stain his pants. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Olivia," she said after a moment. "Olivia Thorne, though I suppose I could go back to my maiden name now, Olivia Taylor." "Everything that made me Olivia Thorne is buried in this ground. I am Yates Drummond," he said, "and I am truly sorry for your loss, Miss Taylor. No words I can offer will take away your pain, but you should not be out here alone." She looked at him with those devastated gray eyes. "Where else would I be? I have no other family in Denver. My parents died years ago back in Missouri, and Jonathan's family disowned him when he married me. They said I was beneath him, the daughter of a shopkeeper marrying a banker's son. They have not spoken to us in 3 years, not even when Sarah was born. I am alone in this world." The sun was sinking lower now, casting long shadows across the cemetery. Yates knew he should continue on his way, deliver those horses, collect his payment, and mind his own business. But looking at Olivia kneeling there in the dirt, looking like she might just lie down on those graves and will herself to die, he found he could not leave her. "Have you eaten today?" he asked. She blinked at him, seemingly confused by the question. I do not know. I cannot remember. Then let me help you up and we will get you some food. You cannot grieve properly on an empty stomach. I do not want food, she said, but her voice had lost some of its sharp edge. I want my daughter back. I want my husband back. I want to wake up and find this was all just a nightmare. I know, Yates said softly. But that cannot happen, and sitting here until you collapse will not change anything. Please let me help you. For a long moment, Olivia just stared at the graves. Then, slowly, she nodded. Yates stood and offered her his hand. She took it, her fingers ice cold despite the summer heat, and he helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "We had rooms above the Mercantile on Larimer Street," she said dully. "Jonathan worked at the bank just down the road. We were saving to buy a house with a yard where Sarah could play. She loved flowers. I was going to plant roses for her." Her voice broke again, and Yates tightened his grip on her arm, afraid she might collapse. "Let me take you back to your rooms." "You need to rest." "I cannot go back there," she said, suddenly frantic. "All of Sarah's things are there. Her little dresses, her doll, the blanket my mother made before she died. I cannot face it. I cannot." Yates thought quickly. "The hotel on Blake Street is clean and respectable. I will get you a room there for tonight, and we can figure out the rest tomorrow." "I cannot afford a hotel," Olivia said, her voice small. "The funeral expenses took nearly everything we had saved. I have perhaps $20 to my name." "Do not worry about the money," Yates said. "Consider it a kindness from one human being to another." She looked at him with suspicion for the first time. "Why would you do this for a stranger? What do you want from me?" He met her gaze steadily. "Nothing except to help someone who is hurting. My mama raised me to believe we are put on this earth to help one another. I have been blessed with good work and honest pay. Sharing a bit of that seems like the least I can do." Something in his tone must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. They walked through the cemetery in silence, and Yates collected his horse before helping Olivia up into the saddle. She sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable, but he led the horse slowly down the dusty streets toward the hotel. Denver was bustling with evening activity. Miners and cowboys filled the saloons, their laughter and piano music spilling out into the street. Shopkeepers were closing up for the night, pulling in their displays and locking their doors. Somewhere a dog barked, and the smell of cooking meat drifted from a nearby restaurant. It was life continuing on as normal, oblivious to Olivia's shattered world. At the hotel, Yates helped her down and spoke quietly with the clerk, a middle-aged man with sympathetic eyes who nodded and handed over a key without asking questions. Yates paid for a week in advance, ignoring Olivia's weak protests, and then escorted her upstairs to a small but clean room with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. "I will have some food sent up," Yates said. "Try to eat something and get some rest. I will check on you tomorrow if that is all right with you." Olivia sank down onto the bed, looking lost and small in the fading light. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Yates paused in the doorway. "Because everyone deserves kindness, especially in their darkest hours. Sleep well, Miss Taylor." He closed the door gently and went back downstairs, arranging for a tray of soup and bread to be taken to her room. Then he left the hotel and stood on the street, suddenly unsure what to do with himself. His horses still needed to be delivered, but it was getting late. He decided to stable them for the night and make the delivery first thing in the morning. As he settled the horses at the livery, he could not stop thinking about Olivia's gray eyes filled with such devastating pain. He had seen grief before, had experienced it himself, but there was something about her particular sorrow that had burrowed into his chest and made a home there. Perhaps it was the senseless tragedy of it, a fever taking a young family and leaving a widow with nothing but graves to visit. Perhaps it was the way she had been completely alone, with no one to comfort her or help her through the worst days of her life. Yates found a boarding house where he sometimes stayed when business brought him to Denver, and he paid for a room. But sleep did not come easily. He lay awake thinking about Olivia, wondering if she was eating the food he had sent up, wondering if she was crying alone in that hotel room, wondering what would become of her now that she had lost everything. The next morning, he rose early and delivered the horses as promised, collecting his payment of $30. Then, instead of heading back out of town as he had originally planned, he found himself walking toward the hotel on Blake Street. He told himself he was just checking to make sure Olivia was all right, that it was the decent thing to do, but some part of him knew it was more than that. Something about her had touched him in a way he did not fully understand yet. The hotel clerk recognized him and gestured toward the dining room. "Your lady friend came down about an hour ago. She is having breakfast." Yates found Olivia sitting alone at a table by the window, picking at a plate of eggs and toast. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes, but she had changed into a different black dress and pinned her hair up properly. When she saw him approaching, something flickered in her eyes that might have been relief. "Good morning," Yates said, taking off his hat. "May I join you?" She nodded, and he sat down across from her. A waitress appeared, and he ordered coffee and breakfast. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Not much," Olivia admitted. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face. She was so scared when the fever got bad. She kept asking me to make it stop hurting, and I could not do anything except hold her and watch her slip away." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she gripped her coffee cup. Yates reached across the table and gently covered one of her hands with his. She did not pull away. "You were there with her," he said quietly. "That matters more than you know. She was not alone. She had her mother's love surrounding her until the very end." A tear slid down Olivia's cheek, but she nodded. "Thank you for that, and thank you for yesterday and for the room." "You did not have to do any of that." "I wanted to," Yates said simply. "What are your plans now?" She laughed bitterly. "I have no plans. I have no family, no job, very little money, and a room full of belongings I cannot bear to see. What plans could I possibly make?" "You could start fresh," Yates suggested. "Denver is full of opportunities. There are families looking for governesses or housekeepers. The mercantile might need clerks. You could find work and build a new life." "Here," Olivia shook her head. "Every street in this town reminds me of them. Jonathan and I used to walk down Larimer Street every Sunday after church. Sarah loved to watch the horses go by. I took her to the park just 3 weeks ago, and she chased butterflies while I read under a tree. How can I stay in a place where every corner holds a memory?" Yates understood that feeling. After his father died, he had left the family ranch in Wyoming and spent years drifting, unable to bear the memories that haunted every fence post and pasture. But running had not made the pain go away. It had just made him lonely. "Where would you go?" he asked. She looked out the window at the bustling street. "I do not know. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere I can breathe without feeling like I am suffocating under the weight of everything I have lost." An idea formed in Yates's mind, crazy and impulsive but somehow feeling right. "I work on a ranch about 30 miles north of here," he said. "It is good land with decent people. The owner, Ben Carlisle, and his wife Martha have been talking about needing help in the house. Martha's rheumatism has been getting worse, and she struggles with the cooking and cleaning. They have a small cabin on the property that sits empty. It is not much, but it is clean and quiet. You could work for them, have a roof over your head, and be away from the city." Olivia stared at him. "You would do that? Arrange a job for me?" "I would. Ben and Martha are good people." They would treat you fair and pay you decent wages. And the ranch is beautiful country, open land with mountains in the distance. It might give you the space you need to heal." She was quiet for a long time, considering. Finally, she said, "I do not know you at all. For all I know, you could be leading me into danger." "That is true," Yates acknowledged. "But you are already in danger, Miss Taylor. The danger of grief swallowing you whole. The danger of giving up on life because the pain feels too big to carry. Sometimes taking a chance on a stranger is less risky than staying in a place that is killing you slowly." Olivia looked down at her hands, still covered by his. "When would we leave?" "Tomorrow, if you are willing. That gives you today to settle your affairs here in Denver. I can help you pack up your belongings from your old rooms if you would like, or I can do it for you so you do not have to face it." She drew in a shaky breath. "I should do it myself. Those were my husband's things, my daughter's things. It would not be right to make you handle them." "Then I will come with you," Yates said. "You should not have to do it alone." After breakfast, they walked together to the Mercantile on Larimer Street. The owner, a kind-faced man named Mr. Peterson, expressed his condolences and helped them carry some crates upstairs to Olivia's rooms. Yates stayed back while Olivia unlocked the door, giving her a moment of privacy. He heard her gasp, a sound of pure pain, and he quickly moved to her side. The rooms were small but had clearly been kept with love. A child's toys were scattered on the floor. A man's coat hung on a peg by the door. On the table sat 3 plates, as if set for a meal that would never be eaten. Olivia stood frozen in the doorway, trembling. Yates gently touched her shoulder. "Where would you like to start?" She pointed wordlessly at a small alcove where a child's bed sat covered in a patchwork quilt. Yates walked over and began carefully folding the little dresses that hung on pegs, placing them in one of the crates. Olivia moved mechanically to the wardrobe and began removing her husband's clothes. They worked in silence for over an hour, packing away the remnants of a life that had been. Olivia cried quietly as she wrapped Sarah's doll in a blanket and placed it in the crate. She ran her fingers over Jonathan's favorite book, a collection of poetry, before tucking it carefully among his folded shirts. "What will you do with all of this?" Yates asked gently. "I will keep Sarah's things," Olivia said, her voice hoarse from crying. "And Jonathan's watch and his books. The rest can be donated to the church. There are families who need clothes more than I need the memories." By late afternoon, they had sorted through everything. Yates arranged for Mr. Peterson to deliver the donated items to the church, and to ship the crates Olivia wanted to keep to the Carlisle ranch. Olivia paid her final rent with some of her remaining money and took one last look around the rooms that had been her home. "Goodbye," she whispered to the empty space, and then she let Yates lead her back out into the sunshine. That evening, Yates took her to a quiet restaurant away from the busiest parts of town. They ate roast chicken and potatoes while he told her about the ranch, about Ben and Martha Carlisle, who had taken him in when he was just a wandering cowboy looking for work, about the horses he broke and trained, about the mountains that turned purple at sunset. "You love it there," Olivia observed, watching him talk. "I do," Yates admitted. "It is the closest thing to home I have had since my father died. Ben taught me everything I know about horses. Martha makes sure I eat properly and always has a spare button if I lose one. They are like family." "You said your father died. What about your mother?" Olivia asked. Yates's expression grew distant. "She passed when I was 12, complications from childbirth. The baby died too, a little brother I never got to meet. My father raised me alone for 4 years before a heart attack took him in the middle of branding season. I tried to keep the ranch going, but I was only 16 and did not know enough. Had to sell it for debts. I have been working other people's ranches ever since." "I am sorry," Olivia said softly. It seems we both know something about loss. Yes, Yates agreed. But loss does not have to be the end of the story. It can be a chapter, a painful one, but still just a chapter. Olivia smiled faintly, the first smile he had seen from her, though it did not reach her eyes. I hope you are right. They returned to the hotel and Yates walked her to her door. Get some rest, he said. We will leave early tomorrow morning. The ride to the ranch takes most of the day. Yates, Olivia said as he turned to leave. He looked back at her. Thank you for everything. I do not know why you chose to help me, but I am grateful. You may have saved my life. You would have found your way through, Yates said, but I am glad I could make it a little easier. The next morning dawned clear and warm. Yates rented a wagon and horse from the livery, knowing the journey would be too long for Olivia on horseback. He loaded her few crates into the back along with supplies for the trip, and then collected her from the hotel. She wore a simple gray dress and a bonnet to shield her face from the sun. She looked nervous as he helped her up onto the wagon seat, but she set her jaw with determination. As they rolled out of Denver, heading north on the dusty road, Olivia looked back only once at the city where she had buried her family. The journey was quiet at first. The landscape opened up around them, rolling prairie grass stretching toward distant mountains. The sky was impossibly blue, dotted with lazy clouds. They passed other travelers occasionally, cowboys driving cattle, farmers with wagons full of goods, but for the most part they were alone with the wind and the endless horizon. Around midday, Yates pulled the wagon off the road near a creek to rest the horse and eat the lunch he had packed. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, eating bread and cheese while the water burbled past. It is beautiful out here, Olivia said, watching a hawk circle overhead. So much space. In the city, everything feels closed in. That is why I prefer ranch life, Yates said. Out here you can breathe, you can think. What do you think about? Olivia asked, genuinely curious. Yates considered the question. Lots of things. The horses I am training. Whether we will get enough rain for the hay crop. Sometimes I think about the future, about having my own place someday. Other times I just try to be present in the moment, to appreciate what I have. That sounds peaceful, Olivia said wistfully. It can be. What about you? What did you think about before everything happened? Olivia was quiet for a moment. I thought about Sarah mostly, what kind of woman she would grow up to be, what I would teach her. Jonathan and I talked about having more children, giving her brothers and sisters. We had plans for the future, dreams of a bigger house, maybe a trip back east to see where I grew up. All of those thoughts feel foolish now, like I was planning a life that was never meant to happen. Those thoughts were not foolish, Yates said firmly. You could not have known what was coming. You were living your life, loving your family, making plans. That is what we are supposed to do. But it hurts so much now, Olivia whispered. Every dream I had is just another thing I lost. Yates moved closer to her, not quite touching but near enough that she could feel his presence. The hurt will not go away quickly. Maybe it will never go away completely. But it will change. It will become something you can carry instead of something that crushes you. I promise you that. She looked at him with those gray eyes full of pain and something else, something like hope trying to break through. How can you be so sure? Because I have been there, he said. Different circumstances, but the same emptiness. The same feeling that the future I imagined was gone. But life has a way of surprising you, of offering new possibilities when you least expect them. They continued their journey after lunch, and as the afternoon wore on, Olivia began to ask more questions about the ranch, about the Carlyles, about the work she would be doing. Yates answered patiently, trying to paint a picture of what her new life might look like. Will I see you often? She asked at one point, and Yates felt something warm unfurl in his chest at the thought that she wanted to see him. "Every day, most likely," he said. "I live in the bunkhouse with the other hands, but I take my meals in the main house with Ben and Martha. You would too, probably, at least at first." "Good," Olivia said quietly. "I would like to have a friend there, someone I know, even if we have only known each other for 2 days." "You have a friend," Yates assured her. "I am not going anywhere." The sun was beginning to set when the ranch finally came into view. The main house was a sprawling structure of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapped around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a bunkhouse, and the small cabin Yates had mentioned. Horses grazed in fenced pastures, and chickens pecked in the yard. Martha Carlyle came out onto the porch as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. Ben appeared from the barn, a tall, weathered man with a gray beard and a gentle manner despite his imposing size. Yates helped Olivia down from the wagon and made introductions. Martha immediately took Olivia's hands in hers. "You poor dear," she said warmly. "Yates sent word ahead about your situation. You are welcome here for as long as you need." Olivia's eyes filled with tears at the kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Carlyle. I promise I will work hard and earn my keep." "We will talk about work tomorrow," Martha said firmly. "Tonight, you will have a good meal and a comfortable bed. You look exhausted." Ben clapped Yates on the shoulder. "Good to have you back. We can talk about those new colts in the morning." Yates nodded, but his attention was on Olivia as Martha led her into the house, already chattering about drawing a bath and finding some clean linens. Ben noticed and gave Yates a knowing look. "She is pretty," Ben observed. "She is grieving," Yates said quietly. "Can be both things," Ben said. "Come on, help me unload this wagon, and you can tell me the whole story." Over the next few weeks, Olivia settled into life on the ranch. Martha put her to work helping with cooking and cleaning, but she was careful not to overwhelm her new helper. Olivia threw herself into the work with a desperate energy, as if staying busy could keep the grief at bay. Yates found himself looking for excuses to be near the house. He would offer to chop extra firewood, or volunteer to fix the squeaky porch step, or suddenly remember that he needed to ask Martha a question about meal times. Each time, he hoped to catch a glimpse of Olivia, to exchange a few words, to see if there was any light returning to her eyes. Slowly, gradually, there was. Olivia began to smile occasionally at Martha's stories about the early days of the ranch. She showed interest in the garden, asking questions about which plants were which. She started taking walks in the evening after the dishes were done, wandering through the pastures to watch the sunset. Yates began joining her on those walks, at first asking permission, then simply falling into step beside her as if it was the most natural thing in the world. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her father's shop that smelled of tobacco and leather, about her mother's beautiful singing voice. He told her about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about his father's patient teaching, about the first horse he ever broke on his own. One evening about a month after Olivia's arrival, they stood watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Olivia had been quiet during their walk, more withdrawn than usual. "What is on your mind?" Yates asked gently. "Today would have been Sarah's 3rd birthday," Olivia said, her voice tight. "I woke up thinking about it, and it has been with me all day. I keep imagining what we would have done to celebrate, what kind of cake I would have baked for her." Yates did not try to fill the silence with empty platitudes. He simply stood beside her, a steady presence. "I felt guilty today," Olivia continued. Guilty because there were moments while I was kneading bread or hanging laundry when I was not thinking about her, when I was not drowning in grief. It felt like a betrayal. It is not a betrayal to keep living, Yates said softly. Sarah would not want you to suffer forever. Neither would Jonathan. How do you know? Olivia asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. Because they loved you. Love wants happiness for the beloved even when the one who loved is gone. Olivia turned to look at him, really look at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time. When did you become so wise? I am not wise, Yates said with a small smile. I am just someone who has learned that holding on to pain does not honor the dead. Living well does. Something shifted between them in that moment, a subtle change in the air like the first hint of autumn in late summer. Olivia reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. They stood like that until the last light faded from the sky, connected in their shared understanding of loss and survival. After that evening, things changed between them. The conversations during their walks became more personal, more intimate. Olivia began to laugh again, real laughter that reached her eyes. She started helping Ben in the garden, discovering she had a talent for growing things. She made friends with the ranch hands, learning their names and their stories, and she spent more and more time with Yates. He taught her to ride, leading her around the pasture on a gentle mare until she felt confident enough to go on her own. They rode out together to check on the cattle, and Olivia marveled at the vastness of the land, at the freedom of galloping across open prairie. 3 months after arriving at the ranch, Olivia was hanging laundry on the line when Yates came riding in from the far pasture. He swung down from his horse and walked over to her, his hat in his hands. I need to tell you something, he said, looking nervous in a way she had never seen him before. Olivia set down the wet sheet she had been hanging and gave him her full attention. What is it? I have been doing a lot of thinking, Yates said, turning his hat in his hands. About my life, about what I want for my future, and I realized that what I want is you. Olivia's breath caught. Yates, I do not know if I am ready for this. I know, he said quickly. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow or even to make any promises. I just needed you to know that I care about you, Olivia, more than I have ever cared about anyone. You make me want to build something permanent, to stop drifting and put down roots. But I will wait as long as you need. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of grief this time. I care about you too, she admitted. You have given me so much, Yates, hope when I had none, kindness when I was drowning, a reason to wake up in the morning, but I am scared. Scared of what? Yates asked gently. Scared of loving someone again and losing them, Olivia said. Scared that if I let myself be happy, it will be ripped away. Scared that I am betraying Jonathan's memory by having feelings for you. Yates set down his hat and took both her hands in his. Loving again does not erase what you had with Jonathan. Your heart is big enough to hold both the past and the future. And as for losing people, that risk exists whether we love or not. But I would rather have loved and lost than never have loved at all. Wouldn't you? Olivia thought about her life with Jonathan, about holding baby Sarah for the first time, about all the joy that had existed alongside the ultimate pain of loss. Yes, she whispered. I would. Then take a chance with me, Yates said. We will go slow. We will build something strong and true. And if you ever need space or time, you just have to tell me. But please give us a possibility. Olivia looked into his creek water eyes and saw patience and love and something solid she could lean on. All right, she said. A possibility. Yates smiled, a wide, genuine smile that transformed his whole face and pulled her into a gentle embrace. Olivia rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and thought that maybe, just maybe, she could let herself hope again. Their courtship was slow and careful. Yates continued to join her on evening walks, but now he held her hand openly. They sat together during meals at the main house, and Martha and Ben watched their growing affection with approval. On Sundays, Yates would drive Olivia into the nearby town for church, and afterward they would walk through the small main street, sharing a bag of peppermint sticks from the general store. Olivia talked about Jonathan and Sarah sometimes, sharing memories, and Yates listened without jealousy or impatience. He understood that they would always be part of her, that grief did not disappear just because new love appeared. Sometimes Olivia would have hard days where the weight of loss felt crushing again, and on those days, Yates would simply sit with her, offering his quiet presence. Winter came to the ranch, covering the land in snow and bringing long, cold nights. Yates taught Olivia to ice skate on the frozen pond, catching her when she stumbled and laughing with her when they both went down in a tangle of limbs. They built snowmen in the yard with the children from a neighboring ranch, and Olivia felt a bittersweet pang watching them play, thinking of Sarah, but also feeling grateful to still be part of life's simple joys. On Christmas Eve, Yates gave Olivia a gift wrapped in brown paper. She opened it to find a beautiful wooden box, carved with intricate designs of flowers and vines. Inside was a letter he had written, and she read it with tears streaming down her face. "Dearest Olivia," it began, "I am not a man of fancy words, but I need you to know what you mean to me. You are the sunrise after the longest night. You are proof that hearts can heal and hope can return. You are strength wrapped in gentleness, courage dressed in vulnerability. I love you not despite your scars, but including them, because they are part of what makes you who you are. I will wait forever if needed, but I hope someday you might love me too. Yours always, Yates." Olivia looked up at him with shining eyes. "I already do love you," she said. "I think I have for a while now. I was just afraid to admit it." Yates cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and reverent. And Olivia felt something inside her that had been frozen since the fever took her family begin to thaw. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and love into that connection. And when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. Spring arrived like a promise, covering the prairie in wildflowers and new grass. The ranch came alive with the work of calving season and breaking new horses. Olivia helped Martha plant the vegetable garden, her hands deep in the rich soil, and felt connected to the cycle of life and growth. One evening in late April, Yates took Olivia on a ride to a meadow he had discovered on the far edge of the ranch property. It was carpeted in purple lupines and yellow buttercups, with a view of the mountains that took her breath away. He spread a blanket on the ground and they sat watching the sun set in glory. "Olivia Taylor," Yates said, taking her hand, "I love you with everything I am. You have made me believe in forever again. Will you marry me?" Olivia felt joy surge through her like a flood. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Yates Drummond, I will marry you." He produced a simple gold band from his pocket, and she recognized it as his mother's ring, which he had told her about during one of their many conversations. "It would mean everything to me if you would wear this," he said. Olivia held out her hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her again, and she was kissing him back, and the meadow seemed to celebrate with them, the flowers nodding in the breeze, the mountains standing witness to their promise. They were married in June in the small church in town, with Ben and Martha standing as witnesses and a handful of ranch hands and townspeople in attendance. Olivia wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers from the meadow where Yates had proposed. As she stood beside him speaking her vows, she felt Jonathan's presence not as a ghost but as a blessing, a sense that he would have approved of her finding love again, of choosing life over endless mourning. The Carlyles gifted them the small cabin on the ranch property, and Yates spent weeks fixing it up, adding a new porch and painting the walls while Olivia sewed curtains and made it into a home. It was simple but cozy, with a bedroom, a main room with a fireplace, and a small kitchen. Olivia hung dried flowers from the rafters and placed Jonathan's poetry book on a shelf next to Yates's collection of ranching journals, blending their pasts into their shared present. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous but eager to fully join their lives together. Yates was patient and gentle, making sure Olivia felt safe and cherished, and when they finally came together, Olivia felt a completeness she had thought she would never experience again. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking quietly about their dreams for the future. "I want children with you," Olivia whispered, then tensed, afraid he might think she was trying to replace Sarah. But Yates just kissed her forehead and said, "I want that too. A whole cabin full of little ones if we are blessed enough." "I will always love Sarah," Olivia said. "And Jonathan." "That will not change." "I know," Yates assured her. "And I will help you keep their memory alive. Any children we have will know about their sister who came before, about the mother's first love. Our family will include them, not erase them." Olivia buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed with gratitude for this man who understood her so completely. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I found you," Yates reminded her with a smile. "Weeping by those graves. Best decision I ever made to stop and help." Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia continued helping Martha, but now she had her own home to care for as well. She grew a garden full of vegetables and flowers, and she learned to preserve food for the winter. She became friends with the wives of neighboring ranchers, joining their quilting circle and helping with community events. Yates worked hard with the horses, gaining a reputation as one of the best trainers in the territory. People came from miles around to buy horses he had broken, and the money he earned allowed him to start saving toward buying his own land someday. But he was in no rush. Life at the Carlyle Ranch was good, and he had everything he needed right there. In the evenings, Yates and Olivia would sit on their porch, watching the sky turn colors and talking about their day. Sometimes they would ride out to the meadow and lie in the flowers, counting stars and making wishes. On Sundays, they visited the small cemetery in town where Olivia had placed a marker for Sarah and Jonathan, keeping the graves tidy and leaving fresh flowers. Yates would stand beside her, his hand on her shoulder, giving her space to grieve while also being a reminder that she had survived and found joy again. The seasons turned. Summer blazed hot and bright. Autumn painted the cottonwoods gold. Winter brought snow and cozy nights by the fire. Spring returned with its promise of renewal. And through it all, Yates and Olivia built their life together, learning each other's rhythms, supporting each other's dreams, loving each other more deeply with each passing day. A year and a half after their wedding, Olivia realized she was with child. She told Yates over breakfast one morning, her hand on her still flat stomach, her eyes bright with hope and fear. "Are you happy?" she asked anxiously, needing his reassurance. Yates came around the table and knelt in front of her, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "I am beyond happy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are going to be such a wonderful mother, Olivia. This baby is blessed to have you." "I am scared," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose this baby like I lost Sarah?" "We will face whatever comes together," Yates promised. "But for now, let us choose hope. Let us believe that this baby will be healthy and strong and will fill our home with laughter." Olivia nodded, letting his confidence bolster her own. Martha was thrilled when they shared the news, immediately starting to knit tiny clothes and offering advice. Ben shook Yates's hand with pride, treating him like the son he never had. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia bloomed with health, her cheeks pink and her eyes bright. She sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her, and sometimes new melodies she made up. Yates was attentive and protective, making sure she did not overwork herself, rubbing her feet when they swelled, reading to her in the evenings. They turned the small second room in their cabin into a nursery, painting it yellow like sunshine and building a cradle from pine wood. Olivia sewed tiny gowns and blankets, her fingers remembering the work they had done for Sarah, but her heart open to this new life. In early spring, as the first wildflowers began to bloom, Olivia went into labor. Martha came to help, and the local midwife was summoned from town. Yates paced the porch, his heart in his throat, praying harder than he ever had in his life. After hours of labor, just as the sun was setting, a baby's cry filled the cabin. The midwife came to the door with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Drummond, and your wife is tired but doing well." Yates rushed inside to find Olivia propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had sewn. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at his son, this perfect tiny human with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to already be searching for understanding. "He is beautiful," Yates whispered, touching one impossibly small hand with his finger. The baby gripped it reflexively, and Yates felt his heart expand in a way he had not thought possible. "I want to name him Thomas," Olivia said. "After my father, Thomas Drummond. Does that sound right to you?" "It sounds perfect," Yates said, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "You did so well, my love. I am so proud of you." Tears streamed down Olivia's face, but they were tears of joy mixed with relief. "I was so afraid," she confessed. "But he is here. He is healthy. We have a son, Yates." "We have a son," Yates repeated, the words feeling like a miracle. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong as Ben had predicted. He nursed well and slept in reasonable stretches, allowing his exhausted parents to rest. Olivia threw herself into motherhood with fierce love, but Yates noticed moments when she would hold Thomas and tears would slide silently down her cheeks. One night when the baby was about 2 weeks old, Yates found Olivia sitting in the rocking chair, Thomas asleep in her arms, crying quietly in the darkness. "Talk to me," Yates said gently, pulling up a stool beside her. "I love him so much," Olivia said. "More than I thought possible. But sometimes when I look at him, I think about Sarah, about how I will never see her at this age again, never watch her grow up. I feel like I am being torn in two, loving this baby while grieving the one I lost." "You can do both," Yates said softly. "You can love Thomas with your whole heart while still holding Sarah in your memory. They do not cancel each other out." "I know that in my head," Olivia said, "but my heart is struggling to believe it." Yates reached out and wiped away her tears. "Sarah will always be your daughter. Thomas will grow up knowing he had a sister who came before him. We will tell him about her, show him her picture, visit her grave. She will be part of our family story. But that does not mean you love Thomas any less. Love multiplies, Olivia. It does not divide." Olivia leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around both her and the baby. They sat like that for a long time, a family learning how to carry both joy and sorrow, both past and present, both grief and hope. Thomas grew into a happy, curious toddler with his mother's gray eyes and his father's easy smile. He took his first steps chasing chickens in the yard, and his first word was horse. much to Yates's delight. Olivia proved to be a wonderful mother, patient and loving, teaching Thomas about flowers and songs and kindness. When Thomas was 2 years old, Olivia became pregnant again. This time there was less fear, more confidence. She had survived childbirth once, she could do it again. Their daughter was born in autumn, with leaves falling outside the window like gold coins. They named her Martha Rose, after the woman who had taken Olivia in and become like a mother to her, and the flowers Olivia loved so much. Martha Rose was a spirited baby with auburn curls and a temper that made them laugh. She kept them on their toes in a way gentle Thomas never had, demanding attention and affection in equal measure. Olivia juggled 2 small children with grace, and Yates helped whenever he could, coming in from the barn to play with the kids or give Olivia a break. The Carlyles adored the children, with Martha teaching Thomas to bake cookies and Ben letting him help with small ranch tasks. The main house rang with the laughter of children again, and it brought life to the aging couple. 2 years later, another son arrived, this one named Samuel after Yates's father. He was a quiet, thoughtful baby who would grow into a quiet, thoughtful boy. The cabin that had once felt spacious now felt cozy and full, with children's toys scattered across the floor and laundry always hanging to dry. Life was busy and exhausting, and more beautiful than Olivia had ever imagined. There were hard days when the children were sick or fussy, when money was tight or the work seemed endless. There were moments when grief would ambush her, when she would see a little girl Sarah's age in town and feel the old wound open fresh. But there were far more moments of joy. Thomas carefully picking flowers to give to his mother, Martha Rose shrieking with laughter as Yates chased her around the yard, baby Samuel sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms while she rocked and sang. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Olivia by having Ben and Martha watch the children overnight. He took her back to the meadow where he had proposed, now familiar and beloved. They lay on a blanket under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding vows, countless moments of love. "You remember that day I found you at the cemetery?" Yates asked, pulling Olivia close against his side. "Every detail," Olivia said. "You were the answer to a prayer I did not even know how to pray. I was so lost, Yates, so broken. I truly did not know how I would survive another day." "But you did survive," Yates said. "You were strong enough to accept help, brave enough to leave everything familiar, courageous enough to love again. I just gave you a hand up. You did all the hard work of healing." Olivia propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "We did the hard work together. I could not have done it without you. You showed me that life could still hold beauty, that my heart could still hold love. You gave me a family again, a home, a future I actually wanted to live." "You gave me the same," Yates said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Before you, I was just drifting, working other people's ranches, never putting down roots. You made me want to build something permanent. You made me want to be the best version of myself." They kissed under the stars, the same tender passion that had marked their relationship from the beginning. When they pulled apart, Olivia said, "I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. Sometimes I feel guilty for being so happy. Jonathan and Sarah are gone, and I have built this whole beautiful life without them. Part of me feels like I should not be allowed to be this content." Yates understood immediately. "They would want you to be happy, Olivia. Love does not demand endless suffering. Jonathan loved you enough to want you to find joy again. And Sarah, if she could know, would be glad her mama found reasons to smile." "I know you are right," Olivia said. "And I am working on believing it fully. Most days I do, but thank you for understanding the complicated parts, the messy parts." "I will always understand," Yates promised, "and I will always remind you that you deserve every bit of happiness you have found." They stayed in the meadow until late, talking and dreaming about the future, about possibly buying their own ranch someday, about watching their children grow up and maybe even having more. When they finally returned home in the early morning hours, they relieved Ben and Martha and climbed into bed, exhausted but content, wrapped in each other's arms. The years continued to unfold. Thomas grew tall and serious, with a gift for gentling horses that reminded everyone of his father. Martha Rose became a force of nature, fearless and opinionated, keeping her brothers in line. Samuel developed a love for books and learning, often found reading when he should have been doing chores. Olivia gave birth to 2 more children, twins this time, another boy and girl. They named them Jonathan and Sarah, honoring Olivia's first family, and it felt like a full-circle moment. Yates held baby Sarah, looking down at her tiny face, and felt the weight of the name, the responsibility to help Olivia raise this child in the shadow of the one who came before. But the new Sarah would forge her own path, distinct from her namesake. She was bold where the first Sarah had been gentle, loud where the first had been quiet. And Olivia loved both versions of her daughter, the memory and the reality, without conflict. Little Jonathan, called Johnny to distinguish him from his father, was a snuggler, always seeking out laps to curl up in, hugs to give freely. He adored his older siblings and followed them everywhere, trying to keep up despite being the youngest. The cabin had long since been expanded, with Yates building additional rooms to accommodate their growing family. It sprawled comfortably now, full of the noise and chaos and love of 7 people living closely together. Meals were loud affairs with everyone talking over each other. Evenings were spent with Yates reading aloud while Olivia mended clothes, and the children played quietly or worked on their own projects. Ben Carlisle passed away peacefully in his sleep when Thomas was 12, and the whole ranch mourned the loss of the kind man who had built something lasting. He left the ranch to Yates in his will, recognizing that the younger man had been like a son to him. Martha continued to live in the main house, now surrounded by grandchildren in all but name, spoiling them shamelessly. Yates took on the responsibility of running the ranch with the same dedication Ben had shown. He was fair with the ranch hands, generous when he could be, and shrewd enough to keep the operation profitable. Olivia helped him with the bookkeeping, her neat figures keeping track of expenses and income, and together they proved to be an excellent team. Thomas began working alongside his father full-time when he turned 15, learning the business of ranching from the ground up. He had his father's patience with horses and his mother's head for numbers. Yates watched his eldest son with pride, seeing the man he was becoming. Martha Rose shocked no one by announcing at 16 that she wanted to train horses too, and she proved to be just as talented as her father and brother, maybe more so. She had a fearlessness that served her well with the most stubborn animals, and Yates learned to trust her instincts even when they challenged his own. Samuel went off to Denver for school at 17, pursuing his love of learning. It was hard for Olivia to let him go, but she knew he needed to follow his own path. He wrote long letters home, filled with details about his studies and the city, and Olivia treasured every word. The younger 3 children were still at home, filling the house with their own particular brands of chaos and joy. Johnny showed signs of becoming a gifted carpenter, always building things from scraps of wood. Young Sarah loved to draw, filling papers with sketches of horses and mountains and her family. And the youngest, Rose, born when Olivia was 42 and thought her childbearing days were over, was a delightful surprise who kept them all young. On a warm summer evening when Olivia was 50 years old and Yates was 54, they sat on the porch of their expanded cabin watching the sun set. Their children and grandchildren, Thomas had married and had 2 children of his own, played in the yard. Martha Rose, still unmarried and claiming she never would be, was teaching her niece to ride. Samuel was home visiting from Denver where he now worked as a teacher. "Can you believe this is our life?" Olivia asked, leaning against Yates's shoulder. "Some days it feels like a dream," Yates admitted. "Other days it feels like the most real thing I have ever known." "I was thinking about that day you found me," Olivia said. "At the cemetery. I was so certain my life was over, that I had nothing left to live for. If someone had told me then that I would end up here, with you, with all of this, I would not have believed them." "What would you tell that version of yourself if you could?" Yates asked, curious. Olivia considered the question. "I would tell her that the pain she is feeling is real and valid, but it will not last forever in that crushing way. I would tell her that love is not a finite resource, that her heart will expand to hold new people without pushing out the old ones. I would tell her to accept help from the cowboy with the kind eyes, because he is going to give her reasons to smile again." Yates pulled her closer. "I did not give you those reasons. I just walked beside you while you found them yourself." "We gave them to each other," Olivia corrected. "You were grieving too when we met in your own way. Grieving the life you had planned, the ranch you lost, the family you never got to raise. We healed each other." It was true. Yates had found in Olivia and their children the family he had always wanted, the roots he had been seeking. The ranch he now owned and operated successfully was the dream he had thought lost when he was 16 and forced to sell his father's land. But it was better than that old dream because it was shared, because every achievement was celebrated with the woman he loved and the children they had created together. Martha Carlyle passed away at the age of 86, surrounded by the family she had helped build. She held Olivia's hand at the end and whispered, "Thank you for giving me grandchildren to love. Thank you for bringing so much life to this ranch." They buried her next to Ben on a hillside overlooking the land they had loved. The whole community turned out for the funeral, a testament to how many lives she had touched. Olivia grieved deeply for the woman who had welcomed her when she had nowhere to go, who had taught her that mothers could be found not just in blood, but in bonds of choice and love. The years marched on relentlessly. Samuel married a woman he met in Denver and brought her home to meet the family. She was a teacher like him, quiet and bookish, and she fit into their loud clan with surprising ease. They had 3 children who spent summers at the ranch, learning to ride and work alongside their cousins. Martha Rose eventually did marry, though not until she was 35 and everyone had given up on the possibility. She married a horse trader who was one of the few men who could match her spirit and skill. They built a cabin on the edge of the ranch property and raised horses together, a partnership of equals. Johnny became a renowned furniture maker, his pieces sought after across Colorado and beyond. He married young, at 20, to his childhood sweetheart, and they had 5 children who inherited his craftsmanship. Young Sarah married a rancher from a neighboring property, combining their lands and creating an even larger operation. She had 4 daughters who all inherited her artistic talent. Yates and Olivia grew old together, their hair going silver, their faces creasing with laugh lines, their bodies slowing but their love never dimming. They still took walks in the evenings when the weather allowed, moving slower now but still hand in hand. They still visited the meadow sometimes, though they drove a wagon now rather than riding horses. Every year on the anniversary of Jonathan and Sarah's deaths, they made the trip to Denver to visit the graves. Olivia would kneel in the grass, older now herself than Jonathan had ever gotten to be, and she would tell him about their children, about the life she had built. She would place flowers on little Sarah's grave and tell her about the sister who shared her name, who carried her memory into the future. Yates would stand beside her, patient and steady as always, and when she was ready, he would help her up and they would drive back to the ranch, to the life they had created from the ashes of loss. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party at the ranch. The yard was full of people. 3 generations gathered to celebrate the love that had started beside 2 graves and blossomed into something vast and beautiful. There was food and music and dancing, and Yates led Olivia in a slow waltz under the stars while their family watched with joy. "Thank you," Olivia said as they swayed together, "for stopping that day, for caring about a stranger's grief, for giving me a reason to keep going." "Thank you for letting me help," Yates replied, "for trusting me enough to build a life together, for loving me and giving me the family I always dreamed of. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia Drummond." "And you are mine," she said, tears of happiness sliding down her weathered cheeks. They danced until the song ended, then stood together surrounded by their children and grandchildren, looking out at the ranch that stretched under the starlight. It was a good life, built on foundation of shared grief that had transformed into shared joy, loss that had given way to abundance, sorrow that had bloomed into love. Yates passed away at the age of 73, peacefully in his sleep with Olivia beside him. She mourned him deeply, this man who had changed the trajectory of her life, who had shown her that healing was possible, that love could come again. But she did not break the way she had broken when Jonathan died. She had learned that grief was survivable, that life continued, that love persisted even beyond death. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. She spent her days tending her garden, telling stories about both her husbands, making sure the younger generations knew where they came from. She taught them about loss and resilience, about choosing life even when death seemed easier, about the power of kindness from strangers who become family. On a warm spring evening, much like the one when she had married Yates so many years before, Olivia passed away in the same bed where she had given birth to her children. Her family surrounded her, holding her hands, singing the old songs she had taught them. Her last words were, "Tell them I am coming home to both of them." They buried her between Jonathan and Sarah in the Denver cemetery, her first family, with a note in her hands for them. But they also placed a marker for her at the ranch beside Yates, because she had belonged to both lives, had loved fully twice, had proven that the human heart had infinite capacity for love. At her funeral, Thomas stood and told the story of how his parents had met, how a cowboy had found a woman weeping by graves and had given her new reasons to smile again. He spoke of the family that had grown from that chance encounter, the legacy of love and resilience that Olivia and Yates had left behind. "My mother taught us that life was precious," Thomas said, his voice strong despite his grief. "That even in our darkest moments, there is reason to hope. That love is not diminished by being shared but multiplied." She survived unimaginable loss and built something beautiful from the pieces. That is the legacy she leaves us, not just land or possessions, but the knowledge that we can survive anything, that we can love again, that we can choose joy even in the midst of sorrow. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations of Drummonds. The story of Yates and Olivia became family legend, told to children and grandchildren, a reminder of where they came from and what they were capable of surviving. The meadow where Yates proposed remained a special place, where couples went to make their own promises, where families picnicked on summer days, where the wildflowers bloomed eternal, and the mountains stood witness to the passage of time. And somewhere in the wide Colorado sky, two souls who had found each other in grief and built a lifetime of love were together again, their story complete, their legacy living on in the land they had loved and the family they had created. The cowboy had found her weeping by the graves, and together they had built something that transcended loss, something that proved love was always worth the risk, always worth fighting for, always worth believing in. Their love story had started in a cemetery but had bloomed across decades and generations, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and the transformative power of choosing to live, to love, and to hope, even when it seemed impossible. They had found each other in their brokenness, and had built something whole, something lasting, something beautiful that would echo through time for as long as the mountains stood and the prairie grass grew, and families gathered to tell stories of the cowboy and the widow who had dared to love again.